This episode is brought to you by the European Coworking Assembly. We are everything Coworking Europe. If you head to the Coworking Assembly website, you can connect with our World Coworking, European Freelancers Week, Coworking Symposium, Coworking Library, and Coworking Tools.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's your friend Bernie here, and I'm very excited for another summer edition, well, summer if you're in Europe, of the Co-working Values podcast. And today in our luxury studio, I have Jerome Chang. What are you known for, Jerome, and what would you like to be known for, sir?
I'm known as one of the few architects who own and operate co-working spaces. And I'm also known for having been in co-working for a very long time, since 2008. I believe that date puts me, I was the first co-working space, Blank Spaces, my brand, was the first co-working space in Southern California, a very big market, one of the first dozen or so in the country. And I believe now today, after the pandemic, when unfortunately many of my colleagues had to close shop, I'm the oldest still operating co-working brand in America.
Ooh, that's very cool. How long does that feel? Because our friend Tony Bacigalupi, I discovered him and co-working in Meetup in 2008. And sometimes when I say that, I feel like it's 10 minutes ago. Actually, I usually feel like it's 10 minutes ago, but how long does that feel after everything you've been through?
A very long time. For me, that's 2 recessions ago. I opened before the Great Recession and then had to endure through a pandemic-induced recession. The ups and downs have been huge. And for someone who has opened and closed spaces, now open about a dozen locations at this point, each opening is like giving, sort of like just giving birth or founding a new company. And so, there's just a lot of effort there.
It is. But we're not here to talk about the history of co-working, Jerome. We're here to talk about I think this is what has bonded you and me over the years on LinkedIn mainly, and in the Idea Project and in Hector's This Week in Co-working Sessions is the amazing white male dominance of panels at co-working and workspace events. So as we enter the conference season, I'm trying to think how to set this up because I've already kind of let the cat out of the bag. But as we enter conference season for what in Europe would be the fall, and how do you feel about the range of diversity and inclusion in events?
I've only ever gone to the American conferences. I went to one in China a half dozen years ago, but mostly I just attend the two major ones in the US. That would be Juicy in the spring, which I attended, and then GWA in the fall, which is coming up next month in DC. And I've notified the conference organizers that after having attended the last half dozen years, their conferences, I'm not going this year because I had been uncomfortable at conferences for some time now, to the point where I would count the number of people in the room to see how many other people who were fellow minorities, or at least apparent minorities. As you can imagine, there are many people who are not people of color or apparent ethnicity, and so therefore I don't know where their origins are. But we people of color, I'm Asian, I'm Taiwanese, it's really shocking to see year over year that there was just way too few of people like me and fellow people of color in the room. And so I made it known to a couple of organizers at the GWA conference. I filled out the survey accordingly. I did a follow-up email accordingly. And I spoke privately to a bunch of people. I'm sure many people who agree with me on this. Some even said that they tried to make some change over the years, nothing. And so I guess this year it's my turn. And so I just emailed, a critical email to the event organizers that, with 1 month left, they show 28 speakers, of which only 8 are women. And there's only 1 person of color out of 28. Maybe there are more speakers. They didn't show it. But if I were a conference organizer and this was a top priority, which it should be, then they should show all those speakers to show that diversity ASAP.
I can beat you on that, Jerome. I'm sorry to say. So here in I'm going to say Europe, okay. So and I'm deliberately not going to call out events because I don't want to create a witch hunt. I want to create, hopefully people listening to this will go, oh, didn't realize that. So there's one. I'm looking at my LinkedIn post from 2 years ago, and it says, today I saw a 25-person speaker lineup on a European-based flexible workspace co-working conference. And I thought there'd been a mistake, and I'm not even trying to be cute here. There were 20 white men, 5 white women, and 0 people of color. And 2 of those 5 white women were the hosts. So that means in a conference that one of the taglines was "the future of work is here" and all that kind of shit was. So there were, if I'm, and I think this is a representation thing. So I'm going to a conference either as a woman or a person of color, and I'm being educated in air quotes by, can't do the maths that fast, but like 20 white men on what the future of work is. And then there's conferences coming up in Europe. One of them has 60 speakers, of which 22 are women, and there is 1 person of color. And most of the people there are from Europe, and the 1 person of color is a male, and I think they're from Asia. I'm not going to say the country because you might know who I mean. And then another event has 6 men, 4 women, and 1 person of color, and the person of color is male also. And then there's other examples. Whereas in co-work in Spain is a very, it's a white, they don't like to talk about it, but it's a white colonizing country. I live in Vigo in Spain, and I grew up in London, and the ethnic diversity and the representation of people of color in Vigo is, dramatically different. And in Spain, Mark and Manel produced a conference that it was basically their commitment, and they achieved it, was 50-50 male and female speakers. And they've been doing this for 10 years in a very white country. And I can't work out, and I messaged Mark to check, but they had people of color there, but it wasn't as good as they wanted it. So they tried to do that, and it didn't work. And they know it was, that if they started earlier, or, there's other things they could have done to rectify that. But the makeup of the country was, it's not a very diverse country. That's what. Whereas in the States is a very diverse country, and there's that list that both you and I constantly refer to, of 70 people in the real estate and co-working industry that are available to speak on a stage. And if we went back to that list, is that from 3 years ago? How many people have had an invitation? That was a monologue, sorry.
Well, I needed those stats. It's unfortunate. We have the same dilemma, maybe worse in Europe, across the pond. So this is not, this is endemic to many countries. And, we both have our specific experiences in our corresponding continents. The GWA one is going to be in DC. I mean, if you can't locally source talent for speakers from there, I mean, gosh.
Jerome, can you explain the makeup of DC? Because, unless you've, read a book about the Freedom Riders, you're not going to, our European counterparts are going to think it's the White House.
Yeah. So the census, US Census, says that there are about 700,000 people in the DC area. Whites are less than 50%. They are 46%. Blacks are black is 45%. Asians are 5%. And then, of course, you have the other categories that will overlap, whether you are, Black and Hispanic, mixed race and all that. But yeah, it's basically 3 things. Whites, 46%, Blacks, 45%, and Asians, 5%. So I went to the GWA conference DC a few years ago, and there was a great increase in number of Black attendees than any other GWA conference I'd gone to. That makes sense. If you're in the flex-based industry, getting to the conference would be very easy because you just drive over. But then it's, incumbent upon the organizers to have the speakers line up to represent in that way. It should reflect the local environment, and that's why you have conferences in different cities, so that you make sure that it adopts the local industry, both in its the product and service, which is in the case real estate and hospitality, and also in the people involved in that. And so what you'll end up happening is probably a pretty diverse attendance makeup, who then will stare at a stage that doesn't reflect who they are. That would be kind of uncomfortable. I mean, I'm counting people when I walk into a room.
That's the bit. Can you say, like, why represent? I mean, I know it is, so which is why I'm sort of hovering over this obvious question. Why is representation so important? So when, like, I had it pointed out about 10 years ago with my friend Elena Giroli, who runs Creative Works. And we put this event on around the sharing economy, and I was like over the moon that I got Dave from Google and Pete from Megacorp, and, and she said, how come do you only know white men that work, have a thing to comment on this? And I'd accidentally, in air quotes, put together a panel that I was so amazingly proud of, big name companies, and, they're all white men and they all look like me. And then I just didn't understand what I was doing to the audience. And can you explain what happens to someone in the audience when they just see, people not like them constantly and constantly and constantly and constantly?
At the core of most people is that they want to just fit in. 5-year-olds feel that way. 15-year-olds feel that way. 45-year-olds feel that way. You want to fit in. And fitting in means that, you have common traits as them, or that you see other people like you. That's it. It's as simple as that. And in an industry, coworking, that has community as part of the word, that means you are a community and you're collaborating and all that feel good aspects of it. And you are not including the diverse makeup of the industry and your members, your customers, and your local environment. Then you are doing not only a disservice to your fellow neighbor, you're being neglectful and honestly offensive.
And let's jump into, because I think this will continue the thread. Can you talk about the 2 idea project sessions you did with Cherry about this topic? And one was earlier this year and one was last year, which I'm sure you remember, but I had to point that out.
Yeah, so Ashley Proctor has created a series of monthly podcasts, video casts, regarding various variety of topics within diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so my topic came up a couple of times where I partnered with Siobhan Sherry to highlight what we are seeing, because clearly what we are seeing is being overlooked or ignored or intentionally neglected by those who are typically running these conferences. And so I guess the only way for things to change, besides calling people out on it, is to have the organizers be fellow minorities and people of color, because it's no different than like what I notice is a lot of co-working spaces are a reflection of the owner. And for years, I tried to have more women in my space, but there are just so many elements of the design, the space, the culture, my branding that just says it's a guy, and when I see co-working spaces run by women, they're like, we can't get enough men in here. And so there are so many elements of your business that just kind of send out that message. And so wherever you can succeed, or wherever you can do notice, you have to be proactive about it. So you and I are guys here, so we have to be proactive for the female gender, cis hetero. So I have to be more proactive of those who are non-binary. Whenever I can see those opportunities, wherever I can be an ally, I need to do that.
There's a lot of this has been said by lots of people in our industry about this topic, which is you have to notice who's not in the room. About I'm sure you do. Can you explain a bit about like making an announcement, everyone's welcome, versus what's the work you have to do to back up the announcement you make?
Yeah, you can't just announce it. You have to invite them. invite them means that you want them there. Announcing just means FYI. So I guess these event organizers who have failed to get more women, more people of color on their panel, on the stage, and say they're not responding to me, it's because your email is not clearly an invite.
I had this, I was telling you before we came on, I had this situation where one event I worked at, and I said to the organizer, have you noticed that 70% of our lineup are all men and nobody is a person of color? And they said, oh, the women just don't email back. And I said, well, we need to try harder. And so on one hand, there's the, we're very busy. We're trying to put the event together and everything like that. And at the time, this was a long time ago, I didn't really understand why women weren't accepting the email invitation. And then I got home and I said, oh, what do you think it is that, and I said to my wife, what do you think it is that, women just don't email back? And she goes, well, we could talk about our household, Mitchell, because there's a few things that you could do here, which would free me up to go and talk at a conference in the middle of the day. And there's lots of people, and a lot of these people have been on the IDEA project, talking about here. There's and in something that shocked me in lockdown in 2020 is how the mother or caregiver's role played out in lockdown versus men. There was a phrase I can never remember, but it's like men took their work home and women took their work and did their housework or something like that. It was put like that, and I felt like we'd gone back to the housekeeping instruction books from the 1950s. Can I ask you about one other thing which comes up a lot is what about accessibility and events? Because I hardly ever see someone who's disabled or special needs, sorry, is the word I'm looking for there, special needs on a stage. And do you think there's something, how come we just don't see that? Does it just get brushed over in the topics we're talking about in gender and race, and people forget about it?
Well, I, as an architect and someone who's trying to be inclusive, have not actually noticed the following thing I'm about to say. But now that I recall, I don't think I've ever seen a ramp that gets on stage, unless you were at a venue where there was a like a theater setup where there was a backstage and a stage. But most of these conferences are at these ballrooms or kind of single floor plate, where then they just put a podium of some sort. I don't think I've ever seen a ramp. So if you don't have a ramp, how do you think that person's going to get up there?
I know there's a marketing conference in the UK. I think it's called Ant and Pete. And there are two guys that host this, and one of them is in a wheelchair. And for a long time, I didn't realize he was. And then in all their branding and stuff, they just went, here we go, And I think it's just turned that from another marketing conference into something like inspirational. They already had a phenomenal lineup of speakers. It was amazingly well produced, and it's given it a welcoming, inspirational edge that sets it out from other events in that thing. Is there anything else we want to touch on? Because I've got this list of things here, but I feel this is going to turn into more than we intended to be if I start on this list, Jeroen.
Similar to the message that Siobhan and I made in the last two IDEA project sessions, is that it's incumbent upon all of us participants in these conferences, whether you're the organizer, you're the attendee, whether you're a sponsor. You have some say in this process. It's not just the organizers. As a sponsor, you can choose to not sponsor or sponsor with certain qualifications, such as making sure that the conference reflects your brand. And if your brand wants to be diverse and inclusive, then you better hope that the conference is similarly diverse and inclusive and equitable. If you're an attendee, you should demand that and say, I will not go unless it is such. And in my case, I'm an attendee only. And I have expressed that sentiment. I am not going because the conference is not diverse, equitable, or inclusive. You will not get my money that I'm going to pay you. So I don't want to pay, north of $2,000 or $3,000 by the time you figure in all the travel costs. It's like a $900 ticket. I'm not going to pay $3,000 so I can be uncomfortable for 3 days.
There's in the UK, there are some high-profile people who, when they're asked to, and they're in the workspace, real estate, co-working universe, and when they're asked to be on a panel, and these are white men, and when they're asked to be on a panel, they ask who else is on there, and if there's more than three. If there's three or more, because most panels are like 3 or 4 people, if more than 75% of the panel, that was a very clumsy way of saying that, sorry. If more than 75% of the panel look like them, they say, I'm not being on that panel. And they've all had people go, what's wrong with you? This is a really good opportunity. He goes, it's not enough of an opportunity to, for me to be on that panel and make it for it to, it's not okay. I've stumbled that as well, is you have to put in the effort to find other people who are not like me to be on that panel, and I'm not coming. And some event organizers just been really rude to them and saying, oh, you're missing out and all this kind of thing. So I don't care, we're the future of work here, and that is not the future of work. And there's, one event similar, the Workspace Design Show, which is in London and Amsterdam. I filled in a form and I said, that was a phenomenal, I thought this was going to be another slightly boring exhibition about workspace. The quality of the talks and the exhibitors and everything was like really, really, really high. And when they have panels all the way through, and none of the people on the panels who are from big name companies pay to speak or sponsor to speak. They're there on their own merit. When I replied to Charlie and Isha and said, I thought this was a great event, but, it was very white men, they emailed back and said, that's something we really need to address. How do you think we could help you with us? And there's people in London that have helped them diversify their panel, and also in the Netherlands. And they actually like going out of their way to, I wouldn't even say going out of their way. They're doing, like extra work to make sure that they don't end up in a conversation like this. So, Jerome, where can we find you? Is there anything you want to point us to online? We can include it in the show notes to, help you with your work and what you're trying to achieve by this conversation.
Yeah, I think LinkedIn is the best. I used to give out my Twitter/X handle, but I think that's not really a relevant platform anymore. Just find me on LinkedIn, Jerome Chang, Jerome, Chang, Chang. And you'll see my post regarding this topic as well. I just hope more people who feel this way will speak up, knowing that they're not alone. And I hope those people who are neutral on it will reassess what's going on and be more proactive and do something about it. All you have to do is speak up. That's it.
Thanks very much for your time today. Thank you very much for your time, listener, wherever you are in the world, whatever you're doing. Really appreciate you tuning in. Go out there and find a little bit of action to take. A really good place to connect and educate yourself about what Jerome and I talked about today is the Co-working Idea Project. I just learn something new every month out of that. And it's like just stuff I would like to know, but I don't know where to look for it. So instead of reading 6 million books on this topic, you can go and tune into people in your industry taking action in their workspaces and lives every day. Be careful out there. It is a jungle.